Story 1. They call me John, but that's not my real name. My true identity, like many other truths about my life, is buried under layers of secrets and shadows, much like the secrets of Area 51. A place most people think they know through conspiracy theories and Hollywood movies, but whose reality is far more terrifying and complex than any science fiction. I worked at Area 51 for over 3 decades, and what I discovered there changed my worldview, challenging the very foundation of my existence. I'm not here to tell tales of flying saucers or alien encounters. Those are childish fantasies compared to what truly lurks in the shadows of that desert. The first time I crossed the gates of Area 51, I expected to find technological advancements and perhaps well-guarded military secrets. What I found, however, was a maze of underground corridors and laboratories that resembled medieval torture chambers more than any modern research center. In the beginning, my work was simple: supervising equipment operations and keeping meticulous records of experiments whose purposes I did not fully understand. But over time, I began to realize I was involved in something far more sinister. Before we dive deeper into these horror stories, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button if you're enjoying the content. Your interaction is crucial for us to keep unraveling mysteries that challenge our reality. Don't forget to comment below which city you're watching from so we know how far our stories are reaching. Years passed, and each discovery left me more isolated. Losing my wife, the only person who anchored me to reality, devastated me and freed me at the same time. With nothing left to lose, I decided it was time to expose the horrors I had witnessed. I prepared myself to face government retaliation, knowing my credibility would be destroyed. I was labeled senile, paranoid, and all the evidence I tried to present was quickly discredited or destroyed. Now, as I share this story, I know I'm exposing myself to even more danger. But I can no longer live with the weight of these secrets. The truth about Area 51 must be revealed, no matter the cost. The forces operating in the shadows of that place are more powerful and terrifying than anyone can imagine, and the public has the right to know that the fiction they see on their screens is but a pale shadow of the reality. This is just the first part of my story, a glimpse into what's hidden beneath the Nevada desert. But remember, once you start uncovering the truth about Area 51, there's no going back. Are you ready to open this Pandora's box with me? One night, as I performed my routine checks in the underground labs of Area 51, something unusual disturbed the silence that normally enveloped the complex after hours. Muffled, agonizing screams echoed through a thick, locked door, constantly guarded by 2 heavily armed soldiers. A dim light escaped through the small observation window, and what I saw through it was enough to make my blood run cold. In the room beyond the door, illuminated only by flickering lights casting eerie shadows on the walls, a creature was strapped to a metal operating table, surrounded by scientists in full biological protective suits. The being before me was a disturbing amalgamation of human and alien traits. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, with dark veins visible beneath the surface. It had large, expressive eyes that reflected an indescribable terror, eyes that seemed to beg for an end to its torment. The creature had elongated, thin limbs, with extra joints that bore no resemblance to human anatomy. Its hands, if they could be called that, ended in thin, delicate fingers with translucent membranes connecting them. The scientists around it manipulated surgical instruments and technological devices I had never seen before, tools that emitted sharp sounds and beams of light that danced over the being's skin, provoking violent muscle contractions whenever they touched its body. The procedures being carried out were clearly invasive and brutal. I noticed several incisions on the creature's body, where tissue samples were being collected while sensors monitored every physiological response to the intense pain. The expressions of agony on the creature's face were so vivid that, for a moment, our eyes met, and in that brief instant, I felt as if a silent connection had been established. Its look of pure terror and plea for help burned into my memory, leaving a permanent scar on my conscience. That underground lab, with its concrete walls that seemed to absorb every sound of agony, became a chamber of horrors for me. Later, I discovered that these experiments were part of a secret transcendent agreement involving terrestrial governments and entities from other worlds. Area 51 wasn't just a research center. Advanced technological development. It was a point of exchange where extraterrestrial technologies were traded for permission to conduct human and non-human abductions and experiments. The mentioned agreements implied a dark collaboration that allowed the U.S. government access to technologies capable of altering the course of war and global diplomacy, in exchange for ignoring the atrocities committed against captured beings, whether human or not. The technologies I saw were revolutionary, including matter manipulation devices, anti-gravity propulsions that defied the laws of physics, and healing systems that could instantly regenerate living tissue. These artifacts, many of which were clearly not of terrestrial origin, represented a quantum leap in our technological capability. They were operated and studied under the highest secrecy, and each discovery only raised more questions about the true intentions and capabilities of the entities with whom our leaders had made these pacts. It became clear to me that Area 51 was much more than just a military base. It was a meeting point for an intergalactic conspiracy, where the price of advanced technology was measured in suffering and silence. The revelation of these secrets transformed me from a mere observer into a keeper of terrible truths, compelling me to question everything I knew about authority, humanity, and the very fabric of reality. And now, under the unbearable weight of these secrets, I feel I must act, no matter the cost to my safety or sanity. It is my duty to reveal the truth about Area 51 so the world can see beyond the shadows, and perhaps find a way to deal with the threats lurking not only in distant deserts, but in the dark corridors where human it. Why is traded for bits of forbidden knowledge? As my determination to unveil the secrets of Area 51 grew, each step I took toward the truth only reinforced the magnitude of the forces I was challenging. It felt like walking against a windstorm that could, at any moment, turn into a hurricane capable of wiping everything in its path. The days following my discovery were marked by increasing paranoia. I knew I was being watched. Hidden cameras, shadows moving furtively through the halls, and the piercing gazes of security personnel made it clear that my attempts to uncover the truth hadn't gone unnoticed. The walls of Area 51, which once symbolized safety and order, now closed in around me like the bars of a prison. I decided to act before it was too late. Using my position and access to the labs, I began documenting everything I could: photographs, experiment reports, covert video recordings, and samples of alien technology that I managed to smuggle out without raising suspicion. Each piece of evidence was concrete proof of the horrors and wonders hidden beneath the Nevada desert. One night, as I prepared to leave the complex with a particularly incriminating set of documents, the alarm went off. Red lights flashed, and the deafening sound of the siren echoed through the corridors. I was surrounded by security before I could even think of an escape plan. Taken into custody, I was interrogated for what felt like days. The questions weren't about what I had stolen, but more about what I knew. The full extent of my knowledge of the clandestine operations at Area 51 became my only bargaining chip. Tense negotiations followed, during which I was offered a deal in exchange for my silence. The offer was tempting: a new identity, a life far from persecution, and the promise that I could live my days in peace. However, the price of that peace would be my complicity in covering up crimes against humanity, and possibly against civilizations beyond Earth. I refused. I knew that, even at the risk of my life, the story needed to be told, not for my vindication, but to alert the world to what was at stake. The knowledge that beings, whether from other countries or other worlds, were being subjected in the name of technological advancement was too heavy a burden to bear alone. Eventually, I was released, but under constant surveillance. I returned to my home, which now felt more like a cage, knowing that my every move was being monitored. Yet, this didn't stop me. I began compiling my discoveries, preparing myself for the greatest challenge of my life: exposing everything. Now, as I write, I am preparing to publish a document that will reveal the truth about Area 51 to the world. I know the reaction will be mixed: disbelief, fear, maybe even retaliation, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. Humanity deserves to know the truth, not just about the horrors committed in its name, but also about the wonders that have been uncovered. Our future as a species may depend on how we handle these revelations. So, as you read these words, Understand that reality can be stranger and more complex than fiction, and that the real battles don't take place on battlefields, but in the shadows and halls of power, where the true cost of national security may be our very humanity. Story 2. My fictitious name is Michael Thompson. I'm 56 years old, born in a quiet suburb of Ohio. My life took an unexpected and dark turn after a career dedicated to government service. I started as an analyst at the White House, where I spent 8 years absorbing the intricacies of politics and national security. But in 2001, a transfer proposal changed the course of my life forever. I was recruited to work at Area 51, in the Living Proof Laboratory. Arriving at Area 51 was like stepping into another world. Located in the Nevada desert, the base is surrounded by secrets thicker than the concrete walls that confine it. My initial task was simple: oversee data integrity and maintain absolute confidentiality about everything I witnessed. What they didn't prepare me for was what I would find in the depths of those laboratories. In the Living Proof Lab at Area 51, reality surpassed the darkest terrors of science fiction. The creatures I documented possessed a diversity that defied terrestrial biological classification. Their skin ranged from iridescent, almost opalescent tones to scaly textures that changed color like chameleons, adapting to the environment around them. Some were of an abyssal black that seemed to absorb light, while others emitted a pale blue or green glow, pulsing under their translucent skin as if they had plasma hearts. Among the most disturbing abilities was telepathy. Certain beings, with their large black and expressionless eyes that seemed like bottomless pits, could project thoughts and emotions so intense that several scientists suffered nervous breakdowns after interaction sessions. These creatures, when they looked at you, didn't just see you but navigated the recesses of your mind, awakening primal fears and forgotten secrets. Other beings demonstrated the ability to manipulate magnetic fields. With subtle gestures of their thin hands and elongated fingers, they could levitate objects or cause failures in electronic systems. One of them in particular, called Conductor by the researchers, could create auroras of dancing light simply by waving its hands, a beautiful and terrifying spectacle that belied the cruel reality of its imprisonment. In addition to these, whispers in the corridors spoke of intraterrestrial beings, supposedly from the unknown depths of Earth itself. These creatures seemed adapted to eternal darkness, with adaptive eyes capable of seeing in complete absence of light. Their skin was pale, almost albino, and their voices, when they chose to speak, resonated like the echoes of deep caves. Living and working among these secrets for 12 years had a devastating emotional and psychological toll. Observing these creatures, each with its own essence and intelligence, subjected to often painful and inhumane experiments, was a daily torture. The looks they gave me weren't just of pain but of a deep understanding of their desperate situation. They knew they were prisoners, objects of study, and the resignation in their eyes was a silent accusation of my own complicity. The burden of keeping these secrets, of documenting every discovery while ignoring their silent pleas for mercy, turned my life into a shadow of what it could have been. Why is traded for bits of forbidden knowledge? As my determination to unveil the secrets of Area 51 grew, each step I took toward the truth only reinforced the magnitude of the forces I was challenging. It felt like walking against a windstorm that could, at any moment, turn into a hurricane capable of wiping everything in its path. The days following my discovery were marked by increasing paranoia. I knew I was being watched. Hidden cameras, shadows moving furtively through the halls, and the piercing gazes of security personnel made it clear that my attempts to uncover the truth hadn't gone unnoticed. The walls of Area 51, which once symbolized safety and order, now closed in around me like the bars of a prison. I decided to act before it was too late. Using my position and access to the labs, I began documenting everything I could: photographs, experiment reports, covert video recordings, and samples of alien technology that I managed to smuggle out without raising suspicion. Each piece of evidence was concrete proof of the horrors and wonders hidden beneath the Nevada desert. One night, as I prepared to leave the complex with a particularly incriminating set of documents, the alarm went off. Red lights flashed, and the deafening sound of the siren echoed through the corridors. I was surrounded by security before I could even think of an escape plan. Taken into custody, I was interrogated for what felt like days. The questions weren't about what I had stolen, but more about what I knew. The full extent of my knowledge of the clandestine operations at Area 51 became my only bargaining chip. Tense negotiations followed, during which I was offered a deal in exchange for my silence. The offer was tempting: a new identity, a life far from persecution, and the promise that I could live my days in peace. However, the price of that peace would be my complicity in covering up crimes against humanity, and possibly against civilizations beyond Earth. I refused. I knew that, even at the risk of my life, the story needed to be told, not for my vindication, but to alert the world to what was at stake. The knowledge that beings, whether from other countries or other worlds, were being subjected in the name of technological advancement was too heavy a burden to bear alone. Eventually, I was released, but under constant surveillance. I returned to my home, which now felt more like a cage, knowing that my every move was being monitored. Yet, this didn't stop me. I began compiling my discoveries, preparing myself for the greatest challenge of my life: exposing everything. Now, as I write, I am preparing to publish a document that will reveal the truth about Area 51 to the world. I know the reaction will be mixed: disbelief, fear, maybe even retaliation, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. Humanity deserves to know the truth, not just about the horrors committed in its name, but also about the wonders that have been uncovered. Our future as a species may depend on how we handle these revelations. So, as you read these words, understand that reality can be stranger and more complex than fiction, and that the real battles don't take place on battlefields, but in the shadows and halls of power, where the true cost of national security may be our very humanity. Story 2. My fictitious name is Michael Thompson. I'm 56 years old, born in a quiet suburb of Ohio. My life took an unexpected and dark turn after a career dedicated to government service. I started as an analyst at the White House, where I spent 8 years absorbing the intricacies of politics and national security. But in 2001, a transfer proposal changed the course of my life forever. I was recruited to work at Area 51, in the Living Proof Laboratory. Arriving at Area 51 was like stepping into another world. Located in the Nevada desert, the base is surrounded by secrets thicker than the concrete walls that confine it. My initial task was simple: oversee data integrity and maintain absolute confidentiality about everything I witnessed. What they didn't prepare me for was what I would find in the depths of those laboratories. In the Living Proof Lab at Area 51, reality surpassed the darkest terrors of science fiction. The creatures I documented possessed a diversity that defied terrestrial biological classification. Their skin ranged from iridescent, almost opalescent tones to scaly textures that changed color like chameleons, adapting to the environment around them. Some were of an abyssal black that seemed to absorb light, while others emitted a pale blue or green glow, pulsing under their translucent skin as if they had plasma hearts. Among the most disturbing abilities was telepathy. Certain beings, with their large black and expressionless eyes that seemed like bottomless pits, could project thoughts and emotions so intense that several scientists suffered nervous breakdowns after interaction sessions. These creatures, when they looked at you, didn't just see you but navigated the recesses of your mind, awakening primal fears and forgotten secrets. Other beings demonstrated the ability to manipulate magnetic fields. With subtle gestures of their thin hands and elongated fingers, they could levitate objects or cause failures in electronic systems. One of them in particular, called Conductor by the researchers, could create auroras of dancing light simply by waving its hands, a beautiful and terrifying spectacle that belied the cruel reality of its imprisonment. In addition to these, whispers in the corridors spoke of intraterrestrial beings, supposedly from the unknown depths of Earth itself. These creatures seemed adapted to eternal darkness, with adaptive eyes capable of seeing in complete absence of light. Their skin was pale, almost albino, and their voices, when they chose to speak, resonated like the echoes of deep caves. Living and working among these secrets for 12 years had a devastating emotional and psychological toll. Observing these creatures, each with its own essence and intelligence, subjected to often painful and inhumane experiments, was a daily torture. The looks they gave me weren't just of pain but of a deep understanding of their desperate situation. They knew they were prisoners, objects of study, and the resignation in their eyes was a silent accusation of my own complicity. The burden of keeping these secrets, of documenting every discovery while ignoring their silent pleas for mercy, turned my life into a shadow of what it could have been. Sleepless nights became frequent, haunted by the eyes of those creatures reflecting terror and intelligence. Knowing they were subjected to cruel interventions in the name of science and national security was an almost unbearable reality, forcing me to question not only the methods but the morality of humanity itself. The transformation in my life began subtly. Frequent visits from doctors who checked my ability to keep secrets, daily medication to maintain mental stability, and constant reminders of what would happen if I spoke. My reality became a daily terror, not only because of what I saw but because of what could happen to me and my family if I disobeyed. One cold and windy December night, the silence in my house was abruptly broken by a loud, insistent knock at the door. When I looked through the peephole, I saw 3 impeccably dressed men in black. They were tall, slim, with pale skin and impenetrable, almost inhuman expressions. The way they positioned themselves, symmetrically and intimidatingly, made it clear they weren't ordinary federal agents. Reluctantly, I opened the door, and the cold emanating from their presence seemed to suck the warmth from the room. They entered without an invitation, each step a dark echo on the wooden floor. The leader of the trio, whose dark eyes seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, fixed his gaze on mine. His voice, when he spoke, had a low timbre and an almost melodic cadence, but each word carried the weight of an implied threat. "Michael Thompson," he began, with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes, "we're here to discuss your recent hesitations. You understand the importance of the confidentiality agreement you signed when you started at Area 51, don't you?" I nodded, my mouth too dry to form words. "Good," he continued, "because it seems you've forgotten the most critical clauses of that agreement. We, on the other hand, never forget. And we never ignore threats to national security, or to the security of certain individuals." The other 2 men, who had remained silent, observed every detail of the room, as if recording every aspect of my life. "If you choose to disclose any information about your activities or what you've witnessed, know that we're prepared to ensure that these revelations never see the light of day. And unfortunately, we'll have to take measures to ensure you also won't continue compromising national security." He paused, his smile widening slightly. "And when I say measures, I mean actions that would affect not only you but also those you love." The air in the room grew heavy, laden with a threat that wasn't just implied but explicit. The men in black were more than mere government emissaries. They were enforcers of an order that operated in the shadows, ruling through fear and manipulation. Their presence there wasn't just to warn me, but to remind me that my life no longer belonged to me. I was just another pawn on the chessboard of their secret operations, and they wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice me if it meant protecting their secrets. When they finally left, leaving a trail of silent cold behind them, I found myself trembling, not from the cold but from fear. The night was no longer just a curtain marking the end of another day, but a reminder that the darkness has eyes and ears everywhere, and that the price of truth might be higher than I was willing to pay. That encounter was a turning point for me. It became clear that my journey to reveal the truth would not only be difficult but also dangerous. However, it also strengthened me in a twisted way. The threat those men represented solidified my resolve. I knew the information I possessed was far too important to remain hidden. If I had to live in the shadow of their threats, it would be while fighting for the light of truth. After that visit, my paranoia intensified. They installed surveillance equipment in my home, monitoring my every move. My privacy and autonomy were completely eroded. Yet something inside me refused to be intimidated into permanent silence. I began secretly documenting everything I could, hiding the evidence in places even the watchful eyes of the government would never suspect. I planned to reveal everything in a major leak, exposing the hidden truths of Area 51. But on the night I intended to release it all, something inexplicable happened. All of my files, notes, and recordings vanished without a trace. In their place, a single message appeared on my computer: "Don't play with the unknown." Since then, I've lived in a constant state of vigilance, questioning everything and everyone around me. I continue my work at Area 51, but now with a terrifying clarity about the power and reach of these hidden forces. My account here, although lacking the evidence I had gathered, serves as a grim testimony and a warning. There are truths in this world that are more dangerous and deeper than we can imagine, and the forces guarding those truths have no limits in their willingness to maintain the status quo. As for the future, it remains uncertain. I continue collecting information, always hoping that one day, somehow, the truth can be revealed in a way that protects those who dare to seek it. But until then, I remain in the shadows, a man marked by the knowledge of what truly resides in the darkness of our world. Story 3. Area 51, that stretch of land in the remote Lincoln County, Nevada, has for decades been the stage for countless military tests and the center of the world's most resonant conspiracy theories. In 2019, this location became entangled in an internet phenomenon that encouraged people to storm the base to see aliens, a movement that began as a joke on Facebook and ended up capturing worldwide attention. The person behind this call to action was Mary Roberts, a 20-year-old student from Bakersfield, California, who posted the event titled Storm Area 51, They Can't Stop All of Us. The idea was simple: if a large enough crowd showed up at the base, they wouldn't be able to stop everyone. However, what the enthusiasts and curious people didn't know was that they would encounter a truth far less exciting and much more lonely than the alien stories they expected. The reality of Area 51 was more mundane, dominated by vast stretches of desert, scattered scientific facilities, and a dry lake bed. The irony of its fame as the world's most secretive base didn't escape anyone. How could a place everyone has heard about be so secret? Among the curious was me, who, under the codename PA, hid a life few could imagine before I became a sort of shadowy entity on the internet. My past as a pilot didn't involve common commercial routes, but secret reconnaissance missions over forbidden territories where truth was often stranger and more terrifying than fiction. I flew through zones the government denied existed, and on one fateful night, a catastrophic failure turned my plane into a free-falling capsule descending into the unknown. In that sinister episode, as my cockpit depressurized and the instruments failed chaotically under the blinding glare of an unidentified light, I quickly realized I was being dragged into the epicenter of something colossal. The inevitable crash wasn't the end, but the beginning of a real nightmare. There was no rescue, only capture. Severe men, dressed in military uniforms that seemed more like shadows, didn't take me to a hospital, but to an underground facility that could never be mistaken for the already notorious Area 51. This secret and horrifying facility was a laboratory of horrors where the government tested not only technologies that defied the laws of physics, but also beings ripped from the darkest nightmares. I encountered creatures with telepathic abilities, communicating through mental waves that sent cold shivers down my spine. Others could alter their physical forms, transforming into indescribable horrors right before my eyes. And then there were those that, according to frightened whispers in the corridors, emerged from the deepest pits of Earth or from far-off corners of the universe. With each passing day, with every secret I uncovered, the unbearable weight of the knowledge I carried grew heavier. The whispered threats from the men in black agents who enforced order and silence about the discoveries were constant. They reminded me that any slip-up wouldn't just destroy my life, but could also unleash irreversible chaos. When I realized that Area 51 was merely a smokescreen, a staged theater to distract the public and keep the government's true activities well hidden, I knew I could no longer keep this secret. I began leaking details, sharing information through hidden channels on the internet, warning the world about the monstrosities not buried under the Nevada sands, but in much darker and more protected places. Today, distanced from the shadows that once imprisoned me, I continue my mission to reveal the truth. I've witnessed the darkest and most dangerous secrets, the price of these hidden truths. Area 51, with all its mythology and mystery, is just the tip of the iceberg of something much deeper and potentially more threatening. Every piece of information I share is a warning, a message to those willing to listen and maybe, just maybe, capable of handling the true extent of what lies hidden beneath our feet. Story 4. With a trembling yet clear voice, VA, an 85-year-old woman, begins to recount her experience as a former employee of the enigmatic Area 51. In her eyes, the glimmer of someone who holds secrets that transcend common understanding of reality. My name is VA, of course, a code name, because revealing my true identity could put not only my life but everyone around me at risk. I worked at Area 51 for over 3 decades, and the things I saw and the missions I took part in could easily be the scripts of science fiction films, if they weren't terrifyingly real. Area 51 is much more than a military base in the Nevada desert. It is an epicenter of activities that defy human logic and ethics. From my youth, I was recruited due to my unusual ability in mathematics and my complete willingness to adhere to secrecy. At that time, the Cold War was at its peak, and any advantage over the Soviet Union was considered vital. But I soon realized that the true interests were much broader and more sinister. In an environment shrouded in secrecy, in the undergrounds of a military base known only to the highest echelons of power, one of the greatest deceptions in human history took place. The falsification of the lunar missions was not just a deception operation. It was a meticulously orchestrated theater aimed at maintaining the illusion of American superiority in the space race during the Cold War, while concealing even darker truths. In the underground labyrinths of Area 51, there were enormous studios, filled with advanced filming equipment that few eyes had seen and even fewer dared to speak about. Film directors, chosen for their willingness to keep secrets and for their technical skills, were brought under strict confidentiality contracts. They directed astronauts who had been trained, not only in space skills but also in acting, on sets that replicated the lunar surface with frightening accuracy. The moon that the world saw through cameras was an artistic creation, a landscape of dust and stone carefully spread across a studio floor. Rocks were brought in from geologically similar regions to the moon and strategically placed. The sky was an absolute black, without stars, designed to avoid questions about the geographical location of celestial bodies. The need for such deception stemmed from a discovery that could have completely altered human understanding of our own existence. Alien technology, incredibly advanced, was already in the possession of the US government, the result of secret agreements with extraterrestrial entities. These technologies allowed for advances that public science wouldn't see for decades, perhaps centuries. In the forgotten and most isolated depths of Area 51, hidden under layers of security and secrecy, meetings took place that defied the boundaries of human comprehension. In these dark gatherings, humans and extraterrestrials sat at a table that resembled a scientific sacrificial altar. Beings from other worlds, with their almost ghostly presence, were a disturbing sight, mixing humanoid features with completely alien elements. These beings, some disguised as humans, hid their true forms under layers of advanced camouflage technology. When they revealed their true shapes, the effect was both fascinating and terrifying. They had skin that ranged from translucent tones to an abyssal black that seemed to absorb light, with textures varying from delicate scales to segments resembling biological armor. Their eyes, large and often luminous, varied in exotic penetrating colors, capable of both observing and hypnotizing anyone who dared stare into them. Some had multiple arms or limbs that defied the laws of terrestrial biomechanics, moving with a grace that contradicted their strangeness. The agreements allowed these beings to conduct experiments that, to an unprepared observer, would appear to be tortures taken from a deep nightmare. The humans subjected to these tests were often kept in altered states of consciousness, so they could endure procedures that explored and mapped every facet of their biology. The experiments ranged from genetic manipulation, introducing alien DNA sequences into human bodies, to tests of psychological and physical endurance, aiming to understand the durability and adaptive capabilities of the human body. The aliens' approach to the experiments was marked by a cold, calculated objectivity. There was no room for morality or ethics in the underground laboratories. To these visitors from other stars, humans were mere objects of study, a collection of data to be gathered and analyzed. This coldness was reflected in the laboratory environment, where machines and precision instruments performed procedures under the cold, bluish light that never dimmed. For the humans involved, whether brave volunteers or those chosen without their consent, the effects of these experiments ranged from profound physical and psychological changes to the complete loss of their humanity, leaving them in a limbo between what they were and what they had been transformed into. Many returned from these sessions unrecognizably altered, carrying in their bodies and minds the marks of a truly alien encounter. These meetings and experiments, though conducted in secrecy, left a trail of horror and fascination that, once revealed, would force humanity to reconsider not only our place in the cosmos but the very essence of what it means to be human. In a deeply hidden setting, where the halls of power stretch far beyond the reach of public light, the truth about global manipulation by a shadowy elite seems more like fiction than reality. Yet, as a witness and reluctant participant in these shadows that shape the world, I cannot remain silent about the activities I witnessed within the depths of Area 51, which revealed themselves to be the epicenter of conspiracies affecting every aspect of human life. The depths of Area 51 served as a stage for discreet meetings between figures of immeasurable power. Industrial magnates, influential political leaders, and representatives of secret societies met regularly under the guise of national security, but their discussions were of a very different nature. Behind locked doors and in secure rooms, they coldly calculated how to spark armed conflicts, manipulate financial markets, and even engineer health crises that could alter entire demographics. These destiny manipulators used war not as a last resort, but as a primary tool to reshape the world's borders. With a finger over a country on a digital map, they could trigger invasions and armed conflicts that would result in the exchange of territories as if they were mere game pieces. They controlled natural resources, oil, minerals, water, as if controlling the planet's breath, slowly strangling it to fill their coffers. In their meetings, they discussed political instability and coups, orchestrating the next major move to ensure their companies and financial interests would thrive amid the chaos they planted on foreign soil. The destruction of one region could mean the enrichment of another, always according to the plans of these dark minds, where ethics were as disposable as the fates of those living in the areas marked for suffering. At the same time, the manipulation of economic crises unfolded in closed meeting rooms, far from the public eye. With just a few clicks on their devices, these masters of the global economy could inflate asset bubbles or cause currencies to collapse. Decisions that seemed abstract on paper and graphs had devastating repercussions. Families losing their savings, young people wandering the streets in despair, and the elderly losing their pensions overnight. The tentacles of these influences reached through the halls of central banks and major financial institutions, intertwining with the structures meant to protect economies but which, under the whispers of these architects of chaos, were turned into tools for amplifying inequality and misery. With every orchestrated crisis, a smokescreen was skillfully raised, distracting the global population from their true enemies. The average citizen, distracted by daily news and everyday struggles, could hardly imagine that their sufferings were often carefully planned in luxurious halls, where wine was served in crystal glasses while discussing the next move on the global chessboard. The reality of these conspiracies would be enough to fuel not just a night terror, but a deep fear of how the world truly operates beneath the polished surface presented to us. In this web of manipulation and power, every crisis, every war, and every collapse was no accident or coincidence but calculated moves to ensure that power and wealth continued flowing toward those who already had both in excess. And amidst these shadows, VA, now old and weary, decides it's time to pull back the veil and reveal the horror behind the curtain, hoping that the truth, once exposed, might finally free us from our invisible chains. Perhaps the darkest discussion was the use of biological agents to trigger pandemics. Under the guise of medical research, viruses and other diseases were developed and, at times, released as a form of population control or as catalysts to push through legislation that would increase government control over populations. My decision to come forward was not made lightly. Each revelation shared here carries the weight of countless personal risks. However, driven by the urgency of my conscience and the advance of my age, I feel that silence would be the greatest betrayal. By revealing these truths, my hope is that we, as a society, can begin to unravel the layers of deception woven around our perception of the world. Let this account serve as a wake-up call to the need for a new era of transparency and understanding. By bringing these shadows into the light, we might begin a period of true change and perhaps prevent future generations from being subjected to the same cycles of manipulation that have defined our time. VA ends her account not as a farewell but as a call to action, a challenge for everyone to question and seek the truth, no matter how deep they must dig or how disturbing that truth might be. Story 5. TM had always been fascinated by the sky. He grew up in a small town in New Mexico, where the stars seemed so close you could almost touch them. The son of an airplane mechanic and a teacher, he had heard stories about aircraft and daring missions from a young age. His fascination wasn't just with airplanes, but with the unknown that stretched above him. From childhood, TM listened to stories of UFOs and unsolved mysteries that seemed so frequent in the region, especially being so close to the infamous Area 51. He dreamed of flying among the stars, maybe even finding some truth out there. At 18, with his parents' support, he enlisted in the Air Force, determined to get closer to the secrets guarded in the sky. TM proved to be an exceptional pilot. His skill and passion quickly led him to reconnaissance missions in highly classified areas. However, it wasn't until after a series of tests and many years of loyal service that he received the offer that would change his life forever, a position at Area 51. Arriving at Area 51, TM felt as if he had entered another world. There, the conspiracy theories he had heard as a child began to take shape as reality. He was assigned to the pilot hangar, where he worked testing advanced aircraft, many of which were whispered to be based on recovered extraterrestrial technology. TM spent long hours in the cockpit of experimental aircraft, flying through the skies above Area 51, airspace more mysterious and restricted than anywhere else on Earth. During those flights, he encountered phenomena that defied all conventional explanations. Lights that moved with a speed and agility that no known Earth technology could achieve, aircraft that seemed to operate on principles not found in traditional physics, and enigmatic shadows that slid through the clouds, appearing and disappearing with an almost playful synchronicity. These sightings weren't just another day on the job. They were glimpses of a hidden world that few were privileged to see. TM felt compelled to document every detail. He kept a meticulous journal, where he recorded the exact coordinates, atmospheric conditions, movement patterns, and any communication or electronic interference that occurred during the sightings. This journal became both a sanctuary for his secrets and a source of his growing torment. He developed techniques to hide his notes, using codes and encryptions only he could understand. He knew that if any of these records fell into the wrong hands, not only would his career be at risk, but his life as well. Secrecy was the highest priority at Area 51, and he was clearly violating that unwritten rule. One night, while working late, organizing his notes in a secluded corner of the hangar, TM felt an overwhelming presence. He looked up to see a shadowy figure watching him from a distance, a silhouette defined only by the faint light escaping from one of the external security lamps. The figure approached, its steps almost inaudible against the metallic echo of the hangar. "You really think you can hide this from us?" The figure's voice was low and threatening, laden with a cold, calculated authority. "You know the rules, TM. You know the consequences." TM tried to explain, his voice faltering under the weight of his nervousness. I'm just trying to understand what we're dealing with here. People should know." "The only thing people should know," the figure interrupted, "is what we choose to reveal. The rest is for the greater good, and you swore to protect that." The threats were veiled but clear. TM knew he had crossed a line from which there was no return. After that encounter, TM's life was never the same. He began noticing unmarked vehicles following him on his daily routes, phone calls that were promptly hung up as soon as he answered. Paranoia took hold deeply, and he knew that every misstep could be his last. Today, TM lives in the shadows, always looking over his shoulder, his life a continuous series of changes and escapes. He keeps his notes and recordings in safe places, hoping that one day they might be used to reveal the truth he fought so hard to document. In his heart, he holds onto the hope that by sharing his story, he might shed light on the mysteries he once witnessed in the skies above Area 51, and perhaps find peace in the truths those revelations bring. TM's dismissal from the Air Force didn't come as a standard procedure, but as a whispered warning cloaked in the darkness of night. On a cold, moonless night, men dressed in black, with stern gazes and imposing postures, knocked on his door. There was no doubt about who they were or what they were capable of. With firm, threatening voices, they made it clear that any attempt to disclose what TM had seen or documented would result in devastating consequences, not only for him but for his entire family. They searched his home with cold efficiency, confiscating every piece of paper and digital media that might contain evidence of his forbidden observations. While they searched, one of them, the leader, approached TM, his penetrating gaze locked onto TM's eyes, his low voice carrying a deadly warning. "Consider yourself lucky we're only taking these." After the raid, TM's life turned into a constant game of cat and mouse. Knowing that the organization hunting him extended far beyond what any civilian could imagine, he had no choice but to disappear. He adopted false identities, changed his appearance, and learned to live like a ghost among the masses. Every shadow cast by a stranger, every lingering glance seemed to herald a new danger. The cities he passed through became mere blurs in his memory. He never stayed long enough to form bonds. His nights were plagued by nightmares where shadows relentlessly chased him, whispering threats on the wind. During the day, his paranoia manifested in every car that followed him for an extra block, every phone call where the line mysteriously remained silent on the other end. The psychological terror of knowing he was being hunted permeated every aspect of his life. Restaurants and cafes became places of quick glances and hurried exits, not of relaxation. Friends and family had become pawns in a dangerous game he didn't want to play. Each new encounter was a potential trap, every new voice on the phone, a possible aggressor. Living in the shadows had become his new reality. TM learned to move silently, speak in whispers, and trust while distrusting. Solitude was both his safeguard and his prison. And in his darkest moments, he questioned whether he would ever emerge from the shadows without fearing for his life or the safety of those he loved. In this clandestine world, TM lives not only with fear but with a faint hope that one day, he might reveal the truth without deadly consequences. Until then, he remains just one shadow among many, hiding from an enemy that never sleeps, an enemy that knows everything he knows and wouldn't hesitate to silence him permanently. Today, TM lives in the shadows, always looking over his shoulder, his life a continuous cycle of changes and escapes. He keeps his notes and recordings in safe places, hoping that one day they may be used to reveal the truth he fought so hard to document. In his heart, he holds onto the hope that by sharing his story, he can shed light on the mysteries he once witnessed in the skies above Area 51, and perhaps find peace in the truths those revelations bring.